morning, Asia. Good evening, America. You are watching World DNA with me, Jyotsna Kumar.
And I'm Hem Kaur Surya, and on the show today, US President Donald Trump has delayed some tariffs when it comes to Canada and Mexico, leading Ottawa to also halt an upcoming wave of countermeasures in moves that have brought reprieve to companies and consumers after blowback on the financial markets. We'll, of course, be discussing this on the show today.
And also on World DNA, Russia has warned French President Emmanuel Macron not to threaten it with nuclear rhetoric and has also mocked his height by calling him Micron. Well, of course, Russia has also ruled out European proposals to send peacekeeping forces from NATO members to Ukraine. We'll be bringing you all the latest updates on that front, but first the headlines.
EU leaders agree on a plan to rearm Europe and boost defense spending, endorse plan to mobilize about 800 billion euros for defense expenditure at emergency talks in Brussels.
French President Emmanuel Macron calls Vladimir Putin imperialist who wants to rewrite history after the Russian president likened him to the Emperor Napoleon over his suggestion to extend France's nuclear deterrent to other European countries.
US West Asia envoy Steve Witkoff says he will travel to Saudi Arabia to speak to Ukrainian envoys about a ceasefire with Russia. Kyiv says talks likely to take place on Tuesday.
President Donald Trump says he will make his first trip abroad to Saudi Arabia to seal an agreement for Riyadh to invest upwards of $1 trillion in the U.S. economy.
SpaceX's Starship spacecraft exploded minutes after lifting off during a test flight, the second consecutive failure this year for Elon Musk's Mars rocket program.
U.S. President Trump delays some tariffs on Canada and Mexico, easing pressure on automakers and markets. Canada pauses its countermeasures, but more tariffs could come on April 2nd.
All right, our top focus on World DNA. European countries have agreed upon a plan to rearm Europe, endorsing the EU Commission's aim to mobilize about $860 billion for defense spending.
And this comes as Washington said talks with Kyiv were back on track to secure a ceasefire, though Russia has rejected all temporary ceasefire ideas floated by Ukraine, France, and Britain.
Now, EU leaders, they've decided to boost the bloc's defenses at a crisis summit in Brussels and rallied around Ukraine amid the prospect of US disengagement.
Today marks a defining moment for Europe, for security of Europeans. A month ago, we had a strategic brainstorming to guide our common action on defense. And today, we are delivering, and we are moving decisively towards a strong and more sovereign Europe of defense.
Now, France's President Emmanuel Macron called for a defense spending surge and suggested extending France's nuclear deterrent to European partners. Macron said he plans next week to hold a meeting of army chiefs from European countries willing to send troops to Ukraine after any eventual peace deal with Russia.
Meanwhile, President Trump has renewed doubts over his commitment to the NATO alliance, saying countries that are not spending adequately on their militaries do not deserve defense.
Well, I've said that to them. I said, if you're not going to pay, we're not going to defend. I said that 7 years ago. And because of that, they paid hundreds of billions of dollars. I said, if you're not going to pay your bills, we're not going to defend you. And it also went for the attack. But if they got attacked, they said, well, does that mean you won't defend us? I said, are you current or are you delinquent? They said, if we were delinquent, would you? I said, nope, I would not.
Speaking to reporters at the Oval Office, Trump also questioned whether allies, including France, would defend the U.S.
They're friends of mine. But if the United States was in trouble and we called them, we said, we got a problem, France, we got a problem, a couple of others I won't mention. Do you think they're going to come and protect us? They're supposed to. I'm not so sure.
Now, French President Emmanuel Macron said France is a loyal and steadfast ally and the country is entitled to ask for the same from the United States.
We are loyal and faithful allies. Anyone daring to doubt that should simply look at our contemporary history. It fully justifies what we have for the United States of America, what I have for its leaders, respect and friendship. And I think we are entitled to demand the same in return because our history shows that we deserve it.
Furthermore, Ukrainian President Zelensky has scrambled to mend fences with Trump. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff said he will travel to Saudi Arabia to speak to Ukrainian negotiators about an initial ceasefire with Russia and a framework for a longer agreement.
Ukrainian and U.S. delegations are expected to meet on Tuesday in the Saudi capital. Witkoff said the meeting will take place in Riyadh or Jeddah. Zelensky said he will be visiting Saudi Arabia on Monday to meet Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, following which his team will stay in Saudi Arabia for talks with U.S. officials.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump also has planned to visit Saudi Arabia, suggesting a deal for major investment from the kingdom. Trump, however, did not mention the date of his visit. All right, for more on the story, we are now joined by Ron Elido. He is a former U.S. military officer, a former CIA contractor, and former intelligence and operations officer at the Pentagon, and is currently the chief executive officer of Miami Intelligence Agency. He's joining us from Florida. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Hello.
Now,
thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Now, let me start by asking you, the leaders in our meeting in Brussels, they're talking about they're determined to invest more, faster. They're calling it rearm Europe. But clearly, they are being conscious of U.S. But can they do it without U.S.?
It's very hard. It's extremely hard for Europe to separate themselves from the U.S. because the U.S. have been the cornerstone of the European defense for the last 50, 60 years, ever since NATO and NATO expansion. The European armies, they don't have what we call the logistic depth to sustain a battle for a long time, to move soldiers, to feed soldiers, to sustain the movement of by air, by sea, of equipment or men in great quantity. So they have been relying in the United States for all that logistic depth for the last 40, 50, 60 years. So it's very hard for them to do that. And they might have a plan, but it's going to take many, many, many years, perhaps 10, 15, 20 years before they can replace with their own resources, the resources that the United States have right now in Europe.
Mr. Lido, also the way things have panned out ever since Donald Trump took office, it almost appears right now that it's Russia and United States on one side and it's Ukraine and of course all of Europe on one side. That being said, when it comes to securing a just peace and when it comes to concessions, when it comes to Russia's demand for Ukraine to not have any NATO ties or alliances, how do you think things will play out when it comes to the battlefield?
Well, right now the things are going to get very bad for the Ukrainians in the battlefield because the heavy lifting, as we say, the most of the military aid came from the United States, and not only the equipment, but also the contractors, the trainers, the people who teach them how to use this equipment, who were advising them, the advisors, and most important, the intelligence. The United States was supplying Ukraine with real-life intelligence. I mean, from spy planes, from satellites in the space, from all kind of spy drones. They were providing targeting intelligence, where to attack the Russians, where Russian concentration, command and control positions. And without that intelligence, they are mostly be blind, the Ukrainians. And without the United States support of weapons and experts and advisors, they're going to be handicapped in many, many ways. They're not going to have the same capabilities. Listen, the whole thing is that Trump doesn't have what we call a globalist neocon war view, a war view that is white and black. Russia is bad and we are good and we must fight Russia. That is the vision, that is the war view of Zelensky and the war view of most European leaders, with the exception of Fico from Slovakia and Orban from Hungary. Fico and Orban, they also have a paleo-conservative, non-neocon, non-globalist worldview, just like Trump. So that is the difference, that Trump sees this conflict as a very complex conflict with many root causes that was from Russia and from NATO expansion, from the coup of February 2014 that promoted U.S. aid and Victoria Nuland. So he understands that this is a very complex situation. It's not a white and black situation, just like Zelensky has been saying for the last 3 years, just like the Biden administration said for the last 3 years, just like the European leaders said for the last 3 years, with the exception of Orban from Hungary and Fico from Slovakia.
Right, and that being said, because you're talking about battlefield now, Steve Witkoff, US's envoy, has said he was going to travel to Saudi Arabia. He will speak to Ukrainian negotiators about an initial ceasefire. However, Russia has clearly rejected the ceasefire or the short-term ceasefire. How do you think US will go forward, and what will their plan be? Because Zelensky is trying to get US and trying to mend ties after the fallout. How do you think US will look for the ceasefire when clearly Russia is not agreeing to that?
Well, Russia doesn't want a ceasefire that Ukraine might use for real to get better positions or more weapons. Zelensky doesn't want a ceasefire. He said very clear last Friday in the Oval Office when he was arguing with Trump. He said very clear, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't trust Putin. Putin broke the agreement. I will not do a ceasefire. I don't know. I need guarantees. So Zelensky doesn't want a ceasefire either. What Trump is now trying to do, he's trying to force Zelensky into the negotiation table. He's cutting the military aid, he's cutting the intelligence, and he's forcing, listen, you have to give concessions. You have to give up land. Forget about Crimea. Crimea is never coming back to you. Forget about being part of NATO. You are never going to be part of NATO. Forget about the Donbass. Forget about the east and south of Ukraine that Russia has occupied. That is gone. You need to accept that. If you try to get all that land back, no concessions at all, listen, we're going to keep putting pressure on you, because then there is going to be war forever. And like Trump said, you are playing with World War III. Those were the literal words that Trump told him in the Oval Office last Friday in the White House. You are playing with World War III. So that's what Trump tries to do. He's trying to force Zelensky into the negotiation table.
Right.
All right, Mr. Lido, thank you so much for joining us on WION World is One with your insights on this. It's been a pleasure to have you on with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, well, moving on to other global news. French President Emmanuel Macron hit back at Vladimir Putin for likening him to the Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte.
Branding the Russian president an imperialist who sought to rewrite history, the exchange came as tensions spiked over Macron's suggestion to extend France's nuclear deterrent to other European countries, with Moscow calling it a threat.
Now, in a speech to the French nation on Wednesday, Macron called Russia a threat to France and Europe and said he would open a debate on extending France's nuclear umbrella to other allies in Europe. The Russian president was quick to respond to Macron's comment with historical reference.
Since the times of Napoleon, since Napoleon's invasion, some people are still eager. There are still people who want to go back to the times of Napoleon, forgetting how it ended.
French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte had invaded the Russian Empire in 1812 in a disastrous 6-month military campaign that ended in Russian victory.
The Macron hit back at Putin after the European leaders summit in Brussels on Thursday, branding the Russian president as an imperialist who sought to rewrite history.
He is an imperialist revisionist of the history and identity of peoples. And what we want is to be a power of a peace and balance. Basically, everything we do through our choices, including those of our armies, to avoid the war of tomorrow, are choices of peace. Therefore, I think that President Putin should return to this vision. In any case, there is a historical contradiction in the reference. It is probably that he was vexed by the fact that we have exposed his game.
Now, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also criticized Macron's comments. He went on to compare him to Hitler and Napoleon, saying that unlike those leaders, Macron did not openly say he wanted to conquer Russia, but he evidently wants the same thing.
He is an imperialist revisionist of the history and identity of peoples. And what we want is to be a power of a peace and balance. Basically, everything we do through our choices, including those of our armies, to avoid the war of tomorrow, are choices of peace. Therefore, I think that President Putin should return to this vision. In any case, there is a historical contradiction in the reference. It is probably that he was vexed by the fact that we have exposed his game.
The former president Dmitry Medvedev also took a shot at the French president, calling him Macron in a social media post. Medvedev wrote that the French leader will soon disappear forever and won't be missed.
All right, let's shift our focus for now. Amidst uncertainty over the next phase of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, the US has reportedly proposed a deal to Hamas involving a 60-day ceasefire in exchange for 10 living hostages.
Last reports, the deal includes negotiations on the second phase of the ceasefire and the resumption of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Hamas is yet to respond to the American proposal. Reports indicate that Israel was kept in the dark in these negotiations.
U.S. President Donald Trump has defended the direct negotiations with Hamas, saying we're helping Israel in those discussions because we are talking about Israeli hostages. Trump argued that negotiating was key to getting out the remaining hostages who are alive.
Look, Biden wasn't able to get anybody out. We came along and they started releasing. But we have 59 left, of which 24 are living. The rest are dead. And I put out a statement. It's sort of self-explanatory, I think. But somebody's going to have to get a lot rougher than they're getting. It's a shame.
Meanwhile, Trump's special envoy to West Asia, Steve Witkoff, said that it wouldn't be prudent for Hamas to test President Trump.
I don't think, as the president has said before, I don't think you alert everybody how you're going to negotiate, well, what your reaction's going to be. But I wouldn't test President Trump.
Now, on the flip side, Hamas says that it remains committed to truce with Israel, but any military escalation against Palestinians may lead to the death of the remaining hostages.
We warn the families of the occupation's hostages and all those concerned that we have proof of life to this day for the remaining living hostages of the enemy, and that any escalation of the aggression against our people will most likely lead to the killing of some of the enemy's hostages, as has happened before in many cases.
Hinting at continuing blocking aid to Gaza, Israeli government spokesperson David Mencer has said that there is no free meal for Hamas if it does not release the remaining hostages.
If there is to be any hope in this region, then the world must stop giving Hamas a helping hand. That is what they want. Anyone who wants to end this war will support these timely measures. Say it again, and we say it again. We give aid, and then we're betrayed. We give aid, and then they throw a grenade. And when they say supplies, it's just lies.
The United States has rejected Egypt's proposal for the reconstruction of Gaza. U.S. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce said that the plan does not meet the Trump administration's expectations. The Egyptian plan, which was endorsed this week by the Arab League, includes temporary housing inside Gaza for 1.5 million displaced Palestinians during reconstruction.
And to give us more details on the story, our New York correspondent Susan Tehrani sent us this report. Listen in.
U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff stated that negotiations are ongoing with Hamas with a focus on the release of injured American-Israeli hostage Edon Alexander. He criticized Hamas for lacking seriousness and honesty in talks and warned of dire consequences if the hostages are not released. Witkoff emphasized President Trump's resolve should not be tested and hinted at a possible joint U.S.-Israeli action against Hamas. He also announced that he plans to visit 4 Middle Eastern countries next week to further address the ongoing crisis. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Right, staying in West Asia, at least 48 people have died in fresh clashes between Syrian security forces and gunmen loyal to ousted former President Bashar al-Assad.
Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said that the fierce fighting in Latakia is the most violent attack against the new authorities since Assad was toppled in December.
Now, pro-Assad fighters killed 16 security personnel, while 28 fighters loyal to Assad and 4 civilians were also killed. Security forces have said that several groups of Assad militia remnants attacked their positions and checkpoints. In a well-planned and premeditated attack, they have declared that they would work to eliminate their presence and restore stability to the region.
Now, during the clashes, the Syrian security forces arrested a top former intelligence officer accused of killing a Lebanese politician. The state news agency reported that the forces have seized Ibrahim Houeja, a former head of Air Force intelligence. He is suspected of numerous killings, including the 1977 murder of Lebanese opposition leader Kamal Jumblat.
Now, as the unrest continues, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said that more than 133,000 Syrians living in Turkey have returned home in the 3 months since Assad was toppled. Turkey is home to nearly 3 million refugees who fled Syria after the civil war began in 2011. The country shares a 900-kilometer border with Syria, along which there are 6 operational crossings.
Now, NASA astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore are stranded in space, have been actually for the past 9 months.
And this is for the longest time the astronauts have remained in that space. Now they have broken their silence. Here's what they said.
I can only say that Mr. Musk, what he says is absolutely factual. We have no information on that, though, whatsoever. What was offered, what was not offered, who it was offered to, how that process went. That's information that we simply don't have. So I believe him. I don't know all those details, and I don't think any of us really can give you the answer that maybe that you would be hoping for.
The NASA astronaut has commented on Musk's assertion that the Biden administration intentionally postponed their rescue for political reasons. He admitted that neither him nor Williams have direct knowledge of the discussions on their return, Though Wilmore initially denied political involvement, his later response seemed to align more with Musk's viewpoint.
Now, the response of the astronaut comes after Musk sparked a fresh debate on the politics of space exploration. He claims the delay of astronauts is politically motivated. He has accused the Biden administration of stalling NASA's decision to bring back the 2 astronauts. He goes on to claim that his company, SpaceX, had offered assistance, but he was allegedly ignored to avoid giving SpaceX positive publicity before the U.S. presidential elections. Musk's accusation suggests that political considerations may have influenced the handling of the space crisis.
Now, despite the growing controversy, neither NASA nor government officials have publicly addressed Musk's accusations. The space agency maintained the delays due to technical concerns and not political interference.
The controversy comes just ahead of the return of NASA astronauts scheduled later this month.
And with that, it's time now for a short break.
But don't go anywhere. On the other side of World DNA, we'll be talking about news from India. The Uttar Pradesh Special Task Force and the Punjab Police have arrested a terrorist linked to the pro-Khalistani group, Babar Khalsa International. We'll talk about that on the other side.
Also on the other side, Donald Trump has delayed some tariffs targeting Canada and Mexico. The U.S. president signed orders to delay the tariffs on imports covered by a North American trade agreement, though he dismissed suggestions that his decisions were linked to market turmoil.
As Ibrahim Ali Khan makes his grand debut, we look at the other upcoming star kids of Bollywood.
Hi, I'm Neena Gupta and you are watching me on WION.
Meet Indian actor Neena Gupta as she talks about her latest release. And find out the actors running in the race for James Bond. All this and much more with me, Diksha Bisla, on WION E-Club at these times.
Amid the mayhem and chaos of M23's takeover of the DRC, more than 50,000 people flee to Burundi, risking their lives by swimming across the Rusizi River. Over 20 dead in the last 2 weeks. The US government's sudden decision to axe funding for HIV programs is a wake-up call for South Africa. The country's health minister says the cuts could lead to deaths. And the love life of South Africa's Zulu king has the country excited and in suspense, and has scandalized his socially conservative subjects as he messes with tradition by seeking a divorce. Wild of Africa at these times on WION. Wild is one.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
Welcome back to World DNA. Thank you so much for staying with us. Lots lined up for you on this side of the show as well. Let's get started with the headlines first.
EU leaders agree on a plan to rearm Europe and boost defense spending. Endorse plan to mobilize about 800 billion euros for defense expenditure and emergency talks in Brussels.
French President Emmanuel Macron calls Vladimir Putin an imperialist who wants to rewrite history after the Russian president likened him to the Emperor Napoleon over his suggestion to extend France's nuclear deterrent to other European countries.
U.S. West Asia envoy Steve Witkoff says he will travel to Saudi Arabia to speak to Ukrainian envoy about a ceasefire with Russia. Kyiv says talks likely to take place on Tuesday.
President Donald Trump says he will make his first trip abroad to Saudi Arabia to seal an agreement for Riyadh to invest upwards of $1 trillion in the U.S. economy.
SpaceX's Starship spacecraft exploded on minutes after lifting off during a test flight, the second consecutive failure this year for Elon Musk's Mars rocket program.
The European Parliament lifted restrictions on lawmakers meeting Chinese officials. As per a report, the new guidelines indicate a potential thaw in EU-China ties.
Donald Trump signs an executive order creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve, a government stockpile of seized digital currency. The move, dubbed a digital Fort Knox, marks a major shift in U.S. crypto policy. Now, in a major breakthrough, the Uttar Pradesh Special Task Force and the Punjab Police arrested a terrorist linked to the pro-Khalistani group Babar Khalsa International.
Now, the arrested man, Lajjar Masi, is believed to have connections with Pakistan's ISI. Authorities claim that he was planning a terror attack during the recently concluded Mahakumbh that wrapped up on the 26th of February in Prayagraj. Law enforcement officials also seized 3 hand grenades, 2 detonators, 13 cartridges and 1 foreign-made pistol. Uttar Pradesh's Director General of Police, Prashant Kumar, called the operation a major success in preventing a potential threat.
Under the leadership of the Chief Minister, there is zero tolerance for crime. A successful joint operation was carried out by UP Police's STF and Punjab Police. An active terrorist of Babar Khalsa International and ISI module, Lajjar Masi, was arrested from Punjab. Illegal arms and explosives including 3 active hand grenades, 2 active detonators, 13 cartridges and 1 foreign-made pistol were also recovered.
State Minister Suresh Khanna congratulated the staff as well.
This is an achievement by ATS. Such attempts are being foiled by ATS. A suspicious man against whom there are a lot of serious allegations has been arrested by ATS. This is an example of improved law and order situation. I congratulate STF for this.
All right, let's shift our focus now. US President Donald Trump has delayed a portion of the tariffs imposed on Canada and Mexico.
Now, the decision comes after financial markets reacted negatively to the sweeping tariffs of up to 25% that took effect earlier in the week. But Trump says he is not even looking at the markets right now.
There were no delays at all. No, nothing to do with the market. I'm not even looking at the market because long term, the United States will be very strong with what's happening here. Now, these are countries and companies, foreign companies, that have been ripping us off. And no president did anything about it until I came along, and then I did a lot about it.
Now, despite the delay, the White House confirmed that 62% of Canadian imports and nearly half of Mexican imports will still be subject to levies, mainly on energy products that at a lower 10% rate. The suspension will last until the 2nd of April, when Trump has warned that new reciprocal tariffs could be imposed. For the auto sector, the temporary pause brings relief as North American supply chains rely heavily on cross-border trade under the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement.
Now, automakers Ford, General Motors and Stellantis has pushed for an exemption, warning that tariffs can disrupt production and raise costs.
Basically makes it more fair for our car manufacturers during the short-term period before April 2nd. April 2nd is a little bit different. That will be much more significant. But during this interim period between now and April 2nd, this makes it much more favorable for our American car manufacturers.
The tariff dispute unfolds as the U.S. trade deficit surged 34% in January, and this marks the largest monthly trade gap on record since 1992. The surge was driven by a 10% increase in imports. The biggest import increases were seen in industrial goods and consumer products, including metal-based items. Experts say businesses are accelerating purchases ahead of anticipated tariffs.
And meanwhile, the stock market remains volatile. Despite Trump's partial rollback, Wall Street extended losses. Analysts warn that prolonged trade uncertainty could dampen business confidence and weigh on economic growth.
Economists are also debating the inflationary risks of Trump's tariff strategy. While U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent insists that price increases could be temporary, analysts warn that higher costs for imported goods could add to inflation pressures. This can potentially complicate the Federal Reserve's 2% target.
Now, Trump's move followed discussions with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, where he cited progress on immigration and drug enforcement. However, tensions with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau remain high, with Trudeau warning that trade conflicts with Washington will persist for the foreseeable future.
I can confirm that we will continue to be in a trade war that was launched by the United States for the foreseeable future. So Canadians should continue to buy Canadian, continue to stand up for each other. But we are trying to reduce the areas and the impact that these tariffs that the Americans are bringing in will have on Canadian workers.
Now, the Canadian government, in response to the tariff pause, has suspended its planned $125 billion countermeasures, but maintains its demand for full tariff removal. Meanwhile, China, another key market of Trump trade policies, has dismissed U.S. accusations about its role in the fentanyl trade, calling tariffs an ineffective solution to the issue. As the April 2 deadline approaches, businesses and policymakers brace for the next round of potential trade actions, with uncertainty looming over global supply chains and economic stability.
For more on this, our New York correspondent Susan Tehrani sends us this report.
The United States has imposed 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, but has temporarily suspended them until April 2nd after talks with leaders. Canada, however, retaliated with 25% tariffs on $30 billion in U.S. goods, while Mexico's response is expected to come by March 9th. Meanwhile, the U.S. increased tariffs on China, prompting China to file a WTO dispute. Markets, of course, reacted negatively, with the dollar hitting a 3-month low and stocks dropping as well. Retailers warn of economic risks as talks and tensions continue. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Now, China's economy is grappling with deflationary pressures and slowing growth despite Premier Li Qiang's push to boost consumption.
With trade tensions rising and inflation targets being cut, will China's economic recovery remain elusive? Take a look at our next report for more on this.
In his annual work report to the National People's Congress, Chinese Premier Li Qiang emphasized the importance of boosting consumption to counter slowing growth and external pressures. While consumption was mentioned 31 times in the report, a significant increase from last year, the government's response remains limited. Despite the emphasis, economists are concerned that policies introduced such as minor increases in pensions and welfare benefits are insufficient to spur substantial demand. Additionally, China faces deflation risks, with the GDP deflator projected to remain negative for a third consecutive year in 2025. This signals a deeper struggle with falling prices, exacerbated by rising tariffs from the US and other trade partners. Analysts warn that this prolonged deflation could hinder recovery. Premier Li's report outlined a $41.4 billion subsidy plan aimed at stimulating consumption, particularly in electric vehicles and household appliances. While the subsidy program boosted sales of these specific items towards the end of the last year, broader consumer demand remains weak, with few signs of growth in other sectors. Measures like a 20 yuan increase in monthly pensions and minor healthcare subsidies are seen as inadequate in the context of China's larger economic challenges. These adjustments account for only a small fraction of GDP, limiting their potential to spark lasting changes in consumer behavior. Structural reforms such as relaxing the hukou system and overhauling the tax structure are urgently needed to address deeper issues and improve household spending confidence. Experts agree that while short-term stimulus measures like subsidies are helpful, they cannot address the underlying issues in China's economy. The focus remains on boosting consumption, but more substantial reforms are needed. This includes tax system changes, land liberalization, and reducing the dominance of state-owned enterprises. Local governments are also set to collect a reformed consumption tax, shifting incentives to encourage spending. However, with rising debt and budget deficits, fiscal constraints may limit the scope of these reforms. As China battles deflation and faces continued global trade pressures, policymakers will have to find a balance between short-term relief and long-term structural shifts to ensure sustainable economic growth. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
Now, the infamous public row between Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and US President Donald Trump has led to speculation that Ukraine could lose access to Elon Musk's Starlink satellite internet system.
Well, reports suggest that Ukraine might be looking at Starlink's smaller European rival Eutelsat for in satellite internet connectivity. Here's a report.
Musk's Starlink has played a vital role in the Ukraine-Russia war. Since Russia's invasion in February 2022, Musk has supplied thousands of Starlink terminals to Ukraine, ensuring that military and civilian communication remains operational. Starlink was also used by Ukraine to guide attack drones, till Musk's rocket firm SpaceX curbed the practice 2 years ago. Eutelsat is already present on Ukrainian soil, but in moderation. It already supports certain government and institutional communications in Ukraine. Since its merger in 2023 with Britain's OneWeb, Eutelsat, alongside Starlink, is now one of only 2 operators with a functional global low Earth orbit satellite constellation. Starlink has around 7,000 low Earth orbit satellites, while Eutelsat has around 630 low Earth orbit satellites. Starlink promises broadband speed of up to 200 megabits per second, whereas Eutelsat offers 150 megabits per second. However, to use Eutelsat, one must install OneWeb user terminals, and that can cost anywhere between $1,000 and $44,000. Plus, there is a monthly subscription fee. While Starlink charges Ukrainian users a one-time payment of $589, in addition to a monthly subscription of $95 to $440, depending on the usage. The French satellite group saw its shares almost triple in value following reports of Starlink's potential replacement in Ukraine. The potential transition from Starlink to Eutelsat leaves Ukraine's communication future uncertain.
All right, now let's take a look at all the news coming out from world of fashion. Stella McCartney drew her audience to an office building for her namesake label's Winter 2025 runway at the Paris Fashion Week.
More on this in our next report. Take a look.
The theme is really, at Stella, I really believe in trying to make life a little bit easier for the working woman, the working mother, wife, sister, daughter, and friend. And I think that, you know, I would wear what I'm wearing now out to a club with a smoky eye and a heel. So that idea of a laptop to lap dance, I thought kind of connected the dots.
It was amazing. It was a great piece of theatre, great to watch, beautiful clothes, women's bodies celebrated, absolutely loved it.
It's all Stella, she elevates everything. She's so chic, the leathers are so beautiful. Just goes to show how luxe, you know, these leathers have come to her. She's just pushed it so far and it's so beautiful. Everything was like just so chic and sexy.
All right, and Hollywood actor Michael Sheen has cleared $1.08 million in debts using his own money.
Now, the star is winning praises for his generosity. The 56-year-old actor launched a debt acquisition company to assist 900 people in South Wales. His efforts were documented on the TV show Michael Sheen's Secret £1 Million Giveaway.
Now, this initiative comes just 5 months after the closure of Port Talbot's last blast furnace, marking the end of traditional steel making in South Wales.
The show sheds light on how banks and corporations profit from society's most vulnerable. Sheen emphasized that he did not have the money to throw around and wanted to ensure the project made a real impact.
Now, back in 2021, Sheen declared himself a not-for-profit actor, pledging to use all his earnings for charitable causes. While he didn't know the names of those he helped, he was aware of their locations and the nature of their debts.
Reflecting on the project, Sheen admitted, and I'm quoting him here, "I thought I would only work on this for a few weeks or a month, and it turned into 2 years because we had to do it secretly."
The actor confirmed that he has now helped 900 people across South Wales clear their debts. He also pointed out that due to the stigma surrounding financial struggles, some individuals may not even realize their debts have been settled. Sheen urged people to check their accounts while the internet continued to applaud his generosity.
right, we'll be slipping into a short break now, but before we go, here's a look at all the climate stories making headlines across the world.